Why explaining simply is a superpower. Most people think explaining something is easy. You just talk, right? But if you've ever tried to teach someone a concept and they looked confused, you already know the truth. Explaining clearly is a skill. And explaining simply? That's a superpower. Here's something important. If you truly understand something, you should be able to explain it in simple words. Complexity often hides confusion. When someone uses too much jargon, technical language, or long complicated sentences, it usually means one of two things. Either they don't fully understand it themselves, or they are trying to impress instead of teach. Think about this logically. A child can understand gravity if you say, things fall down because the earth pulls them. You don't need physics formulas to communicate the core idea. Simplicity doesn't mean dumbing something down. It means removing unnecessary noise so the main idea becomes clear. In this series, we will break down exactly how to explain anything in a simple, structured way. Whether it's science, finance, coding, philosophy, or even complex life ideas. By the end, you won't just understand the theory. You'll know the step-by-step system to make any topic easy for anyone to understand. First, understand it deeply yourself. Before you can explain anything simply, you must understand it deeply. This sounds obvious, but most people skip this step. They memorize definitions. They copy phrases. They repeat what they heard. But memorization is not understanding. And if your understanding is shallow, your explanation will be confusing. Let's think logically. Imagine someone asks you, what is inflation? If all you know is a textbook line like, inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises, you might repeat it word for word. But if someone asks, why does that happen? Or, how does it affect me? You may struggle. That's the test. Real understanding means you can answer follow-up questions naturally. Deep understanding means you know the why, not just the what. You know the cause, the effect, and the connection between ideas. You can see the concept from multiple angles. When you reach this level, explaining becomes easier because you're not relying on memorized sentences. You're building explanations from real comprehension. So before explaining anything, ask yourself, can I explain this without using technical terms? Can I answer basic, why questions? If not, pause and study again. Clarity in explanation always starts with clarity in thinking. Start with the simplest core idea. When you explain something, never begin with details. Begin with the core idea, the most basic version of the concept. Every complex topic has a simple foundation. If the foundation is clear, everything built on top becomes easier to understand. Think about how you would explain how a car works. You wouldn't start with engine compression ratios or fuel injection systems. You would begin with something like, a car moves because fuel creates energy, and that energy turns the wheels. That's the core. Once someone understands that basic idea, you can slowly add layers. This method works for anything, science, finance, coding, or philosophy. If you're explaining the internet, you might start with, the internet is a system that allows computers to talk to each other. That one sentence gives the listener a mental anchor. Now they have something solid to hold on to. Starting simple reduces cognitive overload. The human brain processes information better when it builds step by step. If you throw advanced details too early, the listener feels lost and stops paying attention. So always ask yourself, what is the most basic truth of this topic? Start there. Use simple language, not fancy words. One of the biggest mistakes people make when explaining something is trying to sound intelligent. They use technical jargon, long sentences, and complex vocabulary. But here's the truth. Clarity is more impressive than complexity. If your goal is to help someone understand, your language must serve the listener, not your ego. Simple language does not mean childish language. It means clear, direct, and precise words. For example, instead of saying, photosynthesis is a biochemical process by which autotrophic organisms convert light energy into chemical energy, you can say, plants use sunlight to make their own food. Both statements are correct, but one is easier to understand immediately. When you use simple words, the brain processes information faster. There is less mental strain. The listener doesn't need to translate your sentence in their head. And when people understand you quickly, they feel confident and engage. That emotional comfort increases attention and learning. So as a rule, replace complicated terms with everyday words whenever possible. If a technical word is necessary, explain it immediately in plain language. Remember, your goal is not to sound smart. Your goal is to make the other person feel smart. Use examples and analogies. Abstract ideas are hard to understand. Concrete examples are easy. The human brain learns faster when it can connect new information to something familiar. That's why examples and analogies are powerful tools when explaining anything. An analogy is when you compare a complex idea to something simple and familiar. For example, if you want to explain how the brain stores memory, you might compare it to a library. Just like a library stores books in different sections, the brain stores information in different regions. The listener may not understand neuroscience, but they understand a library. That connection makes the idea clearer. Examples work in a similar way. Instead of explaining budgeting in theory, you could say, if you earn $1,000 per month and spend $900, you save $100. That's budgeting. The numbers make the concept real. Once people see how it works in a practical situation, the abstract idea becomes concrete. The key principle is this: if someone cannot picture what you're saying, they will struggle to understand it. So ask yourself, can I give a simple real-world example? If yes, your explanation will become stronger, clearer, and easier to remember. Break big ideas into small steps. Another powerful way to explain anything simply is to break it into small, logical steps. Many topics feel complicated because they are presented all at once. But almost every complex idea is just a sequence of smaller parts connected together. Think about learning to cook a new dish. If someone says, just make pasta, that sounds vague and confusing. But if they say, first boil water, then add pasta, then cook for 8 minutes, then drain, then add sauce, suddenly it feels manageable. The complexity disappears because the process is divided into clear steps. The same method works when explaining subjects like investing, coding, or even philosophy. Instead of presenting everything in one long explanation, divide it into stages. First explain step 1. Make sure that is clear. Then move to step 2. When each step makes sense individually, the whole concept becomes easy to follow. Breaking things into steps also builds confidence for the listener. When people understand each small part, they feel progress. And progress keeps attention alive. So whenever you explain something, ask yourself, can I turn this into a simple sequence? If you can, you've already made it easier to understand. Connect new ideas to what they already know. One of the smartest ways to explain anything simply is to connect it to something the listener already understands. The human brain does not learn in isolation. It learns by linking new information to existing knowledge. If there is no connection, the idea feels random and harder to remember. For example, if you're explaining how the stock market works to someone who has never studied finance, you could compare it to a marketplace. Just like people buy and sell fruits in a market depending on demand and supply, investors buy and sell company shares based on expectations and value. By connecting the unfamiliar concept to a familiar situation, you reduce confusion instantly. This method works because understanding grows through association. When you say, it's like this, you are building a bridge. The listener crosses from what they know into what they don't know. Without that bridge, explanations feel abstract and disconnected. So before you explain something, ask, what does this person already understand? Can I relate this new idea to something in their daily life? The stronger the connection, the simpler your explanation becomes. Check for understanding, not just silence. Many people think they explained something well simply because the other person stayed quiet. But silence does not mean understanding. Sometimes people stay quiet because they are confused, embarrassed to ask questions, or mentally overloaded. If you truly want to explain something simply, you must check for understanding. One effective way to do this is to ask the listener to explain it back to you in their own words. If they can describe the idea clearly, your explanation worked. If they struggle, it means something needs to be simplified further. Another method is asking small, clear questions during the explanation. For example, does this part make sense? Or, what do you think happens next? These short checkpoints prevent confusion from building up silently. They turn the explanation into a two-way process instead of a one-sided lecture. Remember, communication is not about speaking. It is about shared understanding. The goal is not to finish talking. The goal is to make sure the other person truly gets it. So always verify clarity before moving forward. Remove what is not necessary. One of the most underrated skills in explaining anything simply is knowing what to leave out. Not every detail is important in the beginning. In fact, too many details can destroy clarity. Simplicity is not about adding more information, it is about removing what is unnecessary. Think about explaining how to drive a car to a beginner. You would not start by explaining the physics of engine combustion, gear ratios, or internal mechanics. You would focus on the essentials. Steering wheel controls direction, pedals control speed, mirrors help you see behind. The extra details can come later if needed. First, the foundation must be clear. When you overload someone with information, their brain becomes overwhelmed. Cognitive overload reduces comprehension and memory retention. But when you filter information carefully and deliver only what is required at that moment, understanding becomes smoother and more stable. So before explaining something, ask yourself, what is essential for basic understanding? What can wait? What can be removed entirely? The ability to simplify is often the ability to edit. And good editing creates powerful clarity. Simplicity is mastery. Now let's bring everything together. Explaining anything simply is not about speaking less, it is about thinking clearly. First, you understand the topic deeply. Then you find the core idea. You use simple language. You give examples. You break it into steps. You connect it to familiar concepts. You check for understanding. And you remove unnecessary details. That is the system. When you follow this structure, complexity becomes manageable. You stop trying to impress people with vocabulary. Instead, you focus on clarity. And something powerful happens. People trust you more. Because clear explanations show real understanding. Anyone can repeat complicated words. Only someone who truly understands can simplify. There's an important mindset shift here. Simplicity is not a lower level of thinking. It is a higher level of thinking. It requires filtering, structuring, and organizing information in a way that others can absorb easily. That is mastery. Scientists, great teachers, and strong communicators all share this skill. They make hard ideas feel simple. So from now on, whenever you learn something new, challenge yourself. Can I explain this to a beginner? Can I explain it in simple words? If you can, you truly understand it. And once you master this ability, you won't just communicate better, you'll think better.